All right, last time that we were talking about stuff, we had talked about what a isthmus is. We had talked about how that was a piece of land that connected two other pieces of land together, and we talked about how this was the Corinth, or this is how the Isthmus of Corinth. So we talked about that last time. New bullet, if you would, write down peninsula. New bullet, peninsula. And after you have bullet peninsula, make a 1. Area of land surrounded by water on 3 sides. So a peninsula is an area of land that is on 3 sides covered or surrounded by water. So it's a piece of land, 3 sides, water. Florida is a peninsula. Michigan's peninsula. Michigan has a lower and upper peninsula. So those are probably your best examples of peninsulas. There's also like the Yucatan Peninsula down in Mexico. So it's an area of land that sticks out into the water and it's covered on 3 sides by land. In my picture example, I have here a peninsula. So here's a peninsula in my picture. So you can see how it's a piece of land that's sticking out, kind of looks like a snake. And then on 3 sides, it's covered by water. So you can see that's what a peninsula looks like. So a piece of land covered on 3 sides by water. Next bullet, plateau. Next bullet, plateau. And after you have the bullet plateau, make a 1. Land raised above the surrounding land, usually with a steep cliff. So 1, land raised above the surrounding land, usually with a steep cliff. So that's a plateau. Think about a plateau like a table. So it's flat on top, and then to get to the top of the plateau, it's basically just straight up. So to get to the very top of it, it's pretty much straight up. So it's a very steep cliff, and then it's flat on top. If you're looking for plateaus, places to look for those would be out in like the Grand Canyon area. A canyon is, a canyon, but a plateau is raised land that's then flat on top. But you can find plateaus out by like where the Grand Canyon is, like Arizona area. You can find them out in Wyoming. You can also find some kind of in Africa, in their mountain ranges, and you can find also some in China in the Tibetan plateau area. So those are kind of the main areas that you'll be looking for plateaus. That's where you're looking at. And let me show you a picture of a plateau so you can kind of visualize it. So this is a plateau. So you can see how it's steep cliff up and then it's flat on top. So steep cliffs up and then flat on top. That's called a plateau. Next bullet, valley. Next bullet, valley. And after you have bullet valley, 1, low area surrounded by hills. Low area surrounded by hills. So a valley it's a low area in between kind of 2 other areas. I wrote down here it's surrounded by hills, but it's really surrounded by like a mountain slash hills. Okay. That's really what it's surrounded by. So either like it's in between like 2 mountains and it forms kind of like a V shape going down to it, or it's in between hills. Usually for valleys, you can find a stream or a river in a valley. The reason for that is pretty simple. When water melts or when it rains in a mountain or in the hills, that water has to go, gravity is going to pull it down. So as gravity pulls down that mountain or hill, that water going down that mountain hill, eventually gets down to the bottom of a valley, and that's where it settles at, and then that forms, like a river. So this right here is a valley. You can see how we have mountains, and then you have this little area in between. That's the valley there. And as a generally, there is a running source of water in this valley. Just because, water that melts has to go somewhere. All right, next bullet, plain. So next bullet, plain. And a plain is a flat area of land, sometimes with small rolling hills. So a plain is a flat area of land, sometimes with small rolling hills. So generally a plain is pretty flat. Columbus, Indiana, it's flat here. This is what's called a flood plain because it floods here and that flattens out the land. when it floods. So this is the plains, Columbus, Indiana. As you go over into Brown County, that's when it starts becoming a bit more hilly, and then you get more into Brown County, onto the west side. Then it becomes, pretty hilly. So that's not a plain. So a plain is just a flat area of land. Okay, and sometimes there's small rolling hills, just like if you go around Columbus. There's hills around. It's not like perfectly flat, but it's mostly flat. And then for my picture here of a plain, this is a picture of a plain here. So you see how it's mostly flat and that there's some hills kind of in the back, but it's mostly flat with some small rolling hills. Next bullet, bay. Next bullet, bay. So a bay is an inlet area. Oh, let's make it one. And write down an inlet area where the sea meets the land. So we have bay and then one, an inlet area where the sea meets the land. So a bay is the opposite of a peninsula. A peninsula is three sides of a piece of land surrounded by water. A bay is a piece of water surrounded on three sides by land. And it's kind of like an inlet. So it's kind of like in a little bit, like into the shoreline. And that's kind of what the bay is. And then, it's like three sides are covered. Bays are usually pretty good for boats and so forth. The reason for that is that if it's in a bay, there's less waves that are smashing into the area, into the bay. So unlike the rest of the shoreline, it's not a bay, it's going to hit by these waves. And a bay is usually a bit more protected from waves. And that makes it good for boats to sit at, because that way they're not bobbing up and down constantly or smashing up against the dock because the wave smashed them into the dock, So you kind of have that stuff. I'll show you an example of a bay. So this, no bay, this is the bay back here. So you kind of see it's three sides covered by land. All right, so this bay right here, very well covered by land. It's just got this small little gap right there for water to go into, and then the boats can all dock back here. And because it has this protection, because it's so well covered by land, waves, if waves do come in this area, which this is already kind of a inlet and such, but even if waves do come in this area, they're going to get slowed down by the land kind of sticking up here and such. And that will then make it so that this is pretty easy going. It's not really wavy at all. And that's where boats can kind of hang out at, bashing up against docks and so forth because of waves and such. Okay, let's go ahead and stop there for today.